It's pretty interesting. You done everything else?
Gina checked out. She did. She
Time being 7 o'clock, August 9th, 2021. I'd like to call the regular scheduled council meeting to order. Will you all please stand and face the flag and repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor to the Texas flag, allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Before we go to public input tonight, I have 2 announcements to make briefly. Tonight, we will be live streaming the council meeting via YouTube. You can access to the town YouTube channel can be found on the front page of the town website under news. Please note that there is approximately a 30-second delay with live streaming. The council members, please speak directly to the mic when talking so that all words are heard. Also, I'd like to introduce our Constable Dan Rochelle. Dan is going to be providing security for town council, and I've also believe the court, the court bail. He's a constable in precinct 3. Well, next I'd like to go to public input. Anyone who's not tonight to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item may do so at this time. You will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. After your 3 minutes, if the council chooses to extend your time, they may do it by consensus of council. First person to speak tonight is Jim Burns.
Good evening. Thank you. And Ron, you and I had a row some months back, and I want to apologize to you personally. I was out of line.
Please.
There are 2 points that I'd like to address with the drainage channel between 606 and 616. Options 1 and 3 in the document, neither one of those specify using any grouted / slurry cement, which is basically why the original stones that were laid failed. The water comes through there. I've seen it more than 6 feet deep, and the rocks just get washed away unless they're slurried into place. So going with option 3 that's been recommended by this document, it is one of the 2 of the 3 options that do not address slurry. The option number 2 does address using a slurry grouted cement to stabilize the rocks. If we don't do that, it's going to fail just like it did the first time. If it would have been done correctly the first time, we wouldn't be talking about it now. Secondly, the options, all 3 of them here, ask for the property owners to sign an easement waiver to allow access to the property for the work that needs to be done. It's very general, just, it's a contribution of the landowner, whatever. But before I will sign an easement agreement or waiver, there are several caveats that I will require before I sign that document. Number 1 is I want to know exactly what trees are going to be cut that I will lose on my property or at the edge of my property, or specific explanation of which one of those will be cut. Also, I have a shop which is about 8 feet from the drainage channel. I want to assurance that that will not be disturbed. I have probably $4,000 to $5,000 in rebuilding that shed or shop over the last several years, and I actually help a lot of the next door neighbors throughout this entire area, fixing all kinds of things, small engines, electrical, plumbing, minor things. And it's how Tina and I supplement our income. If that is disturbed or torn down, it will have a major effect on our lives. Also, there are 4 bushes close to the road that have been on that property for 20 to 30 years. They're 5 feet tall, very robust. They're right at the property line. If those have to be taken, I want the bushes, somebody come in there with a big backhoe, lift them out, move them across the driveway out of the way, and when construction is done, move them back. If I lose those, it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars to replace them with anything a third the size of what those are. Also, the last time this was done, there was significant changes to.
I'm going to wrap up your time.
There was significant changes made to the slope of the driveway going toward the drainage channel, which has resulted for several years to cause water to pool in our driveway. I would like to see that also addressed, but we need to address these caveats in the future before I will sign the waiver of easement.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Lisa Humphrey on the same subject.
My name is Lisa Humphrey. My husband Jay and I live at 616 Jim Chapel, just on the other side of the creek from Jim and Tina. Thank you for this opportunity. I just want to give you a little of our perspective on the creek. We've been here almost 4 years, and there's been some torrential rains that we were very surprised about once they occurred. And the creek rapidly fills up with water to near overflowing on at least 4 occasions that I remember. Tina can vouch for going much further back than that, where it's just almost to the very top. And, we were concerned that it might breach. The velocity of the water and the volume of the water flowing there is extreme. It reminds us of like rapids in Colorado that are very aggressive and, even violent. We see large logs flowing through and even rocks flowing through in the current when the water is pushing through as fast as it is. Some of the rocks are even found on the other side of Jim Chapel, all the way down into the, I'm not sure what you call it, the other side where it's pushing through under the Jim Chapel bridge. So I'm just trying to give a little perspective on how this creek, it's most of the time it's dry, but when it rains, I don't know where all this water's coming from, but there's a lot. And I have not seen animals going by in it, but if any fall in, it would be very dangerous. We're pleased that the council is discussing a longer term solution to remedy the creek issues instead of a Band-Aid. We see this creek, the Burleson and the Humphreys see this creek every day. We're very close to it. And I have seen a young mountain lion in there one time, just traveling it. He went all the way through to under the train, the bridge there. So I think it's kind of a wildlife highway at times. So I agree with Jim on the stabilizing of the creek. It has very large boulders in it right now, and a lot are still there, but they're shifting. So they're moved. So we have 2 big logs that are stuck on these shifted boulders and kind of jaggedy, and they're not floating downstream. So it's building up somewhat of a dam. So I do think the floatable concrete, we're going to call it a slurry, I'm not sure what the proper term is, would solve a lot of problems there. It would also secure the creek so that it doesn't sink. We're having it's sinking and it's causing soil erosion on our property. It's pulling it down. And I know that it said riprap in the.
Wrap up.
Oh, okay. All right. So we hope this project can be completed rather quickly to avoid the fall rains, because we don't know how aggressive those are going to be. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Donna Smith.
Hey everyone, I'm just following on last month's rendition of the Aspen Community Park. So I had two more things I would like to add. The gas engine's still on. Okay, so I guess needless to say, I need to be electric, just as the ordinance states. The other thing I would add is this, according to the ordinance under the noise management, the compression facility must be completely enclosed, complementary of the surrounding area. If it's missing a door, it's missing a roof, it's not completely enclosed. If it's the outlet in my store, it's not complementary to the surrounding area, so I'd like the town to have enforce the ordinance and request from them to have this facility completely enclosed and complementary to the surrounding area. The other thing is that not sure why they're allowed to operate 24/7. If I'm not allowed to cut my grass 24/7 and run my 19 horsepower engine, why are they allowed to run a 250 horsepower 24/7 sound? So I think if they're gonna be smacked down in the middle of a residential area, we should just abide by the same rules. It doesn't make sense to me, like they're in front of me and they can run a 250 horsepower engine. But if my next door neighbor to my left decided to cut his grass at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can now pull the cops on him, they'll come and shut him down, solve that problem, but I can't do the same to them. So I need also to see if we can have some sort of time limitation as to when they can make noise. They can't just make noise 24/7. That's a possibility. The number 4 thing that I'm requesting is that, and you guys can tell me what I need to do. The ordinance as it states right now, it says they're allowed to make a 52 decibel noise. Whoever decided 50 decibel, obviously did not come and live in my house and see in my master bedroom. So how do I go now about requesting a 52 decibel to go down to 42? And I'd like you guys to vote on a new ordinance to replace the 52 with 42. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple questions?
No. Yeah, this is all legal litigation. Two attorneys right now. It's early, it's 4 o'clock today, been involved in discussion with state attorneys, town attorneys. The speaker was involved in conversations, so please trust the fact that there's more to this than that.
Because this is a repeat from last month.
There's more,
Okay.
yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Jeff Tasker.
Mayor Matt Hanson, thanks to the council.
Yep.
There should be an extra, so.
Go ahead, sir.
With name Jeff Tasser, 1335 Windsor Center Trail, Suite 150, Flower Mound, Texas. Mayor, council, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I represent 2 people who are trying to move to your town. Mike and Cynthia Fan, they actually live in Flower Mound now, trying to move here. They're trying to purchase a 2-acre plot of land to build a house. And they want to live here. They're not developers. This is where they want to move their home to live. The current owner is Scott Wilson. I believe Mr. Wilson's here tonight. He may speak as well. He purchased that house, the property from a gentleman named Jeffrey Brandon. When it was purchased, the purchase did not comply with your ordinance. The purchase did not comply with your subdivision ordinance, was not platted properly. So that's a problem, right? So we've got an unplatted piece of property, 2-acre piece of property, and I'm trying to pick that on there. If you look at the part on the right top, that's the 2-acre portion that came out of a 6-acre portion. After that occurred, the town attorney sent a letter to Mr. Brandon, and I'll pass that out to you too, just so you can see. And if you'll look at the 3rd paragraph on the 1st page,
It says the nature of the R773235 will not hinder your ability to sell the property. He's saying you violated, she's saying you violated the ordinance. It's not going to prevent you from selling the property. But be advised that should you or any future owner of the property desire to obtain a building permit, add improvements, or otherwise alter the existing nature of the property, the owner of the property will be required to plat the 2-acre property with the town and take any action deemed necessary by the town to bring the property into compliance with the town's subdivision ordinance, according to the relevant ordinance. That's perfectly fine, and that's an appropriate response from your town attorney. Well written. That's who we are. We're the people trying to buy the property and come in and make it compliant. So there's a problem here because it's someone else subdivided without compliance with your ordinance. And all my clients want to do is come and be the people that buy that piece of property and make it compliant. They're willing to plat the property. They're willing to do whatever the town would like for them to do to be able to make the property compliant so they can move here. Since April, we've been contacting staff, town attorney, and everyone else, trying to get some guidance and some direction on that very thing. Otherwise, the property is going to sit dormant or in perpetuity. And so we're willing to be here to solve the problem that the town has. We're a willing participant. We didn't cause the problem. We're just trying to solve it. But we haven't been able to get any traction on an answer regarding what is it that you require of us. And the phased purchase of this property is contingent upon them being able to do that. Wisely, their agreement is has that contingency. In other words, they don't want to buy a piece of property they can't. It sounds like Mr. Wilson may already have that problem, and but we didn't create that. So we're just trying to solve it. And we're happy to do whatever you need us to do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Scott Wilson.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for letting me come in here. I just want Mr. Tasker doing a wonderful job and working with this property and finding solutions. A little bit of background. The summer of 2019, my wife and I wanted to build a home here in Copper Canyon, very beautiful area. We wanted to live where you guys live. And we had full access at that time to an easement road that led to the property. And it was very unfortunate that there has been illegal dumping on my property right now, and trying to clean it up and get all this taken care of, but there's no access now. We're restricted from using the access easement. So there's just a lot of work to be done. But after we were restricted, found historical data that shows this easement that was shared between my property and adjacent property owner. But still, I'm still having to work with a couple of property owners so I can walk across 2 properties to get to my own. And it just doesn't seem very fair. So I found where we were cleared to use this easement through the initial platting and through the fire department. Mr. Skinner, who originally owned the property back in '92, he bought it from Jerry Campbell, was able to build his house out there before anybody else, and was able to use that exclusively because that was the only way in and out of that area. So there have been 3 other landowners after him and before us that had the same right. So our goal is to, finish the platting and the acreage, be compliant with the town, just like Mr. Tasker was saying. But the direction, since I was on a virtual town meeting over spring break, the town recommended that I turn in documents and my professional services, and that's been done. And like it's been said earlier, it's been almost 5 months, and we're just losing traction on this. Mr. Tasker's been doing a great job in providing accurate data and problem solving, and has a great way to prove and get us back in compliance with the town. So with this, the access is kind of ridiculous. I understand why, but I don't believe it's fair, and I would like to get access back. So the questions are, why are we still being denied access? I see that families are able to purchase properties and build, and they're in subdivisions and they're in small acreages, but there's a big 2.9 1 acre through your next zone for 2 acres. We were trying to get that done, and I can't even get to the property to look at. Okay, yes, sir. You said right now?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, sir. So I guess, looking at the purpose of, why deny a property owner access to his own property through an established egress easement that's on his property, these are the things that we need to work through. Just wanted to ask for the next step. I'm sure Mr. Asker's asking for the next step, and we'd like to actually go out there and have a look at the property.
Thank you. I'd encourage council, if you have any questions on this, please get with Don. We'll discuss it tonight. There's a history to this that involves other property owners, so they can look into that. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next item is staff, mayor, and council report. I've given my report so far tonight. I have a report on the budget for a little while. Council, any reports, liaisons, etc. Hearing none. Staff, consent agenda. Oh, staff report. One extra study. Chris. Oh, no, not Chris. Chris?
I'll leave that.
Well, this, ladies and gentlemen, let's give about 40 to 45 minute presentation on Poindexter drainage study.
All right, good evening, everyone. Some of you were here a couple of weeks, or actually a couple of months back, when we did kind of an initial Poindexter study presentation, just to give an update. Now we're at a point where we've gone through, more or less completed all the existing or proposed, and we've looked at several alternatives to perhaps mitigate it, and then kind of open up discussion and public input kind of from this point forward. Today, Jared, we met last time, he's not available. We have Mandy, who is actually the head of our hydraulic drainage department, and she will be presenting today.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Mandy Clark. So as Chris said, I'm the Director of Water Resources for T. Mullen Perkins. So this is our team on this project. And as Chris also said, Jared was unable to be here. And so I will do a presentation. So the purpose of the presentation this evening, we're going to talk about the purpose of the study as a whole, its goals, and a little bit of background, and we're going to talk about existing conditions. Those two items, the first two items, are a bit of a refresher from Jared's presentation. So just for the audience and the people at home, just to get a little bit of background. Then we're going to talk about the conceptual alternatives that we've come up with and evaluated to solve some flooding problems in the area. And we did do an erosion evaluation as well. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then the next steps of the study. So I would also like, if you have any questions, please interrupt me. I would prefer it to be more conversational and things to get asked as we go. That would be hopefully better. So the biggest purpose of the study was to accurately map the floodplain. So the floodplain, and we've done that, and it's some exciting news, but I'm not going to give it away just yet. But it is the biggest benefit. It's a benefit to the homeowners in the area. It's a benefit to builders and developers in the area. And the original FEMA maps are largely what you have in the city today that were done in the 70s. FEMA periodically updates them for Togo, but they don't look at the flows coming through the floodplain. And so this isn't the first time that your city has been looked at as a whole for this, the flows coming through the floodplain. There was a small area done with Meadow Drive a few years ago, but as a whole, this is the first time it's been done. So it's good practice to update your floodplain maps periodically. And so the maps will show areas of flood risk, both to homes and to infrastructure. And then we've identified the mitigations and mitigation measures, so some alternatives. And then the last step was to prepare a flood management strategy action plan, which we can talk about at the end a little bit, because it really can be whatever the city wants it to be, whatever nature needs. So I'm gonna go through just some brief overview of terminology I'm gonna use. I know many of you have heard this before, but just to kind of give a refresher on what some of these terms are. And sometimes I'll use some things interchangeably, and I don't want you to, I don't want you to say, well, what you talking about. So a storm event, storm event terminology, you hear under your floodplain all the time. Does that doesn't mean every 100 years we get this particular event. It means that you have a 1% chance of getting that event in any given year. It doesn't mean you can't have it twice in 2 weeks or twice in 2 days, but it's a probability. It's probability storms. And so a lot of times, people will say, well, you're saying that this road overtops, I've never seen it, and I've lived here for 40 years. Well, it's the probability storm that particular event might happen. Also, so like a 2-year, the smaller event, so the 2-year event is a 50% chance, and so on. So those storm events are determined by intensity, so how much rain falls per hour and how long that rain lasted. And so it's extremely difficult to say that storm we had last week was a 5-year event, or that storm we had last week was a 10-year event, because the storms can vary amongst the watershed. We might not have data, it's just very difficult. But when you, but for instance, Hurricane Harvey was 200 to 500-year events in close succession. So that's, how different it can be, and they vary between 26 inches over the watershed to 47. So it varies along in large areas. So recent events in Copper Canyon in 2018 in September, you had an event that was 5.77 inches total. And you had a gauge in town, and it showed that 1.66 inches fell within an hour. And that translates to approximately a 2-year event. So that was the most recent large-ish storm we were able to find. But it is based on probability, and I won't belabor that. Sorry. Yes.
How often, so they update the area on the ground, or so-called, every 34 years or so?
Probably every 5 to 10 years, they'll look and get fresher topo.
Okay.
But they won't look at the flows unless the city or a developer comes to them and updates.
How often are the rainfall totals that with these percentages updated? Or is that a static number?
It's pretty static. The period's changing, as climate changes, they'll adjust it based on data, but it's very static.
Okay. So you said you had a 1-2-year event, and that's one.
Well, I just
Well,
see
you
an
mentioned-
event we found.
That's what you mentioned.
Yeah, we were looking for some events, but if it didn't hit that exact
Okay.
gauge, we have trouble finding. It's hard to say. I would like
Sure.
to say, when you get this many inches, that's.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and then the floodplain. So the terms floodplain, 1% storm, 100-year storm, base flood elevation, those terms are used interchangeably. And the two things that can change that flood elevation are fill, because that will squeeze it in and cause it to rise, or increases in flow. So typically new development will, could change the flood elevation if it's not mitigated somewhere else. And so we take those storm events and translate them to the FEMA maps. So you'll hear them called FEMA maps, you'll also hear them called firm flood insurance rate maps. And those maps are used by cities to regulate their floodplain to ensure that people are not building in the floodplain or where they're not supposed to. And also by insurance companies to rate flood insurance. And then freeboard, I'm gonna use freeboard here and there, and that's basically just the distance between the water surface elevation and whatever you're measuring to. So for a bridge, it's the low board on the bridge. And for a home, it's the finished floor elevation. And your town has good criteria when it comes to your drainage criteria. Your bridges and culverts are required to convey the 100-year event. And your bridges are required to convey that with 2 feet of freeboard. So the water surface will be 2 feet below the bottom of the bridge. And your culverts are required to convey 1 foot of freeboard, plus 1 foot of freeboard. And then your homes, are supposed to be 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. So that's, I think, good standards that you have. Are there any questions related to that before I move into more specifics of the watershed?
So, sorry, so if the standard is to keep 2 feet freeboard, I can walk out there and I can see today water lapping the bottom of the bridge.
Because those are old bridges that were not designed to do that standard. So this is new development that is.
New development,
New
sorry.
development is built to these standards.
Not the old development again. Okay, great, thank you.
So, existing conditions. So this is your drainage area. It's also called the watershed. It's 4.2 square miles. You can see, I have a laser pointer. I don't think I have one. Oh, you have one? I know I have one. I just don't know which button it is. I forgot to. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So this is Copper Canyon that goes north and south, and the railroad here, and then Chin Chapel Road along the eastern boundary. So you can see that probably about half of your here's I have one down. You can borrow mine. Oh, you have it? Okay, but mine's working. So about half of your watershed is on the Lantana side, and about half is within your city limits. And your city limits were are your basically city limit to city limit. So from your eastern city limit line or your western city limit line along Copper Canyon to Chin Chapel. So that is the boundaries of the flood city. Land use conditions. So land use is important when you're talking about calculating flow because the more dense your development is, it tends to generate higher runoff. So roads and rooftops and parking lots will generate more than the rural style development and the large lot development that Copper Canyon tends to have. Lantana did do some studies though, and they have detained any increases that they had were generating. So that is part of the regulations there. And then your existing floodplain limits. So the green is unstudied floodplain. So we talked about that previously. So that is area of the floodplain that has been the same since. It's changed a little bit since the 70s, but not much. The blue is the area of your meadow and the railroad that was studied for the Meadow Drive improvements that were done, I believe, around 2006. And then the black line is the new floodplain boundaries that T-Mall Perkins has generated. And it is, you can see where in some areas it got wider, in some areas it got narrower, some areas cut off some floodplain. It is common to see some shifts here and there, and what you normally see is some widening of the floodplain when you have it active for many years. And then existing homes in the floodplain. So this, I think, is the most exciting spot to find. So most flood studies, when you update your maps, will show more homes in the floodplain than when they started. This one removes 6. So currently within the FEMA floodplain, there are 9 homes shown to be within the floodplain. 6 of them, those purple dots, have been removed or will be removed from the floodplain with the study. And then the red dots are homes that are remaining within the floodplain. So I think that's really interesting and some good news that it actually showed better conditions than before. So now some specifics.
The really only thing that affects those people is flood insurance. That's the only thing it affects.
Yes, but I mean, that's, if they're carrying flood insurance, it's a big benefit to them.
Will this
If they're
study
carrying
allow them to not carry flood insurance?
The study alone will not, but we can submit it to FEMA, and if FEMA adopts the new maps, then we're gonna talk about that a little bit, about that option.
Can I clarify something real quick? Just a bit ago, you said that Lantana did a study with FEMA prior to building your development?
I don't know
Is
that
that
they
correct?
did it with FEMA, but with all the phases that they did, they would do an evaluation of their downstream impacts, and then they would have been required to mitigate.
And you said that
We have not
because of
found
that
any,
study, nothing more is coming from that side than normally was before.
We
Is
haven't
that correct?
found evidence of that. It's just like they did everything.
So what they did then was contain their pre-existing as well as their new gonna be existing, so that it didn't impact us downstream. Is that what
That was
you're
the idea, is
That's what
that
you said.
they should have detained their flows.
saying? So it's had no change whatsoever.
Should not have been
Interesting.
should not have been a change based on the studies that we.
So the assumption that Montana is the reason for the excess water in the town is an erroneous one?
I wouldn't 100% say that, but I'm saying that it appears that they did everything that they were supposed to do in more studies and construction of detention.
So when you talk to anyone, the engineers there, that they met and exceeded any of their water retentions, when they did the original design in the 90s.
That would have been the standard. So the railroad is probably the biggest contributor of floodplain issues, at least, or impacts to the floodplain, I guess I can say it that way. It is undersized. There are two 12 by 10 box culverts. And so what that does is create a damming effect. So you can see it from our maps. That 100-year floodplain line kind of bows out, and you see that damming effect. So that creates the water deeper floodplain, and it really impacts the conveyance at Meadow Drive. And then Meadow Drive is an existing 80-foot bridge. It currently passes the 10-year event, so it does not meet the city standard. During a 100-year event, the depth over the road is predicted to be 0.8 feet. And the reason that that's important is that it's a cul-de-sac. And so that could impact emergency access for those 9 lots that are on the other side of the bridge.
Do you know what year the box culverts were built under the railroad? Have you had that information?
I don't have that with me as far as I don't have that with me. I would imagine it probably is. And so then I get in the floodplain, so you can see how it kind of backs it up, and the floodplain is still very wide and Meadow Drive. And then Estates Road, that is probably the oldest bridge on the, that we looked at through the study. It only conveys the 2-year event, and the estimated depth over the road for that bridge is 3.7 feet, so that's significant. It is also a cul-de-sac, and so that could impact emergency access for 5 lots in that area.
They changed that, improving that bridge, making that bridge taller, bigger boxes. What does that do downstream? Does that help anything?
Well, I'm going to show you that with our conceptual alternatives. So that's one of the alternatives, is to improve some of the bridges. And so you can see the floodplain here where it's flowing for the road in the state. And then the Chinchapel Bridge. So this one is performing the best. It is an 80-foot bridge opening. It passes the 100-year storm. It doesn't meet a freeboard requirement. We would never suggest that you rebuild the bridge just because it doesn't meet freeboard. But if you were to rebuild it, it would be a good idea to achieve your design standard. And it is really controlled also by the Lake Louisville backwater, so you're a little limited with how much could flow through there, because it'll hit a wall at some point and not be able to do much more flow. There are some erosion issues at the bridge and in the channel. So here's a picture of the floodplain at Chinchapel. And here's some erosion pictures. So you can see here, I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the end, but you can see there's some undermining of the riprap at the outfall. Then there's some erosion down here, but I don't believe it's adjacent to anything to be, concerned about, but that would be something to look at.
No, question for you right there. So the riprap there, that's flowable concrete on that riprap?
It looks like some grouted, yes.
Okay,
grouted
rather
rock.
flowable concrete, thank you.
Yes, there's a better picture of it. So any questions about the existing conditions of the bridges before I show you the alternatives?
They just did this, Jim Chapel, they just finished up a few months.
Yeah, about a year, less than a year ago.
Is this picture here, if I'm standing on the bridge, which way am I looking for clarification? Am I looking
You're looking east.
towards the railroad or downstream?
Yeah.
Downstream. Okay, so when it comes under the box,
Yeah, it's southwest.
Okay, but I was picturing, I didn't get to go because it's locked, so I'm sorry. No.
I believe it's southwest.
Yes,
Okay.
so the water's flowing towards us from that
towards
way.
us, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it
So
comes
it's coming-
around that corner and then hits the rocks.
Yeah, it's coming down that long stretch, hitting the wall, bouncing over on this side,
Yeah.
and going back to the area underneath the wall. That's what's creating this problem.
So we would need to get some more pictures and some more.
But I mean, just from looking at that, that's what.
That's probably what exactly what was happening. Okay, then the alternatives we looked at. So our goals were to reduce flooding for the at-risk homes, provide bridges safe for traffic during the 100-year event. So we've talked about both of those things a little bit, and to meet the town criteria where feasible and practical to do so. And so some strategies we looked at were bridge reconstruction, and that's probably the lion's share of what we looked at for the alternatives. And then each of the bridge reconstruction alternatives has either some channel grading or some home buyouts. And then we looked at stormwater detention on a more regional scale, and then we looked at buyouts alone. And so I want to talk a little bit about buyouts because I think that gives, I think a lot of towns and cities have a little bit of anxiety when it comes to buyouts, as you should, because I don't think, buying out homes is never something that should be taken lightly. But it is an alternative, and it is a viable alternative. It's often one of the more cost-effective alternatives. But what we've tended to see is it's always a voluntary program where you let people know you have funding available if you should choose to, have to have your home purchased by the city, we have money available for that.
May want to use a different number for real estate and property.
Well, so what we used was the CAD, the appraisal district value plus 50%, and then plus 100,000 each for demo. But we recognize that the real estate market is a little bit crazy right now, so that would probably take a little bit more looking, but we just needed a number to plug in a number that we could defend. So we're not here to tell you buyouts or what you should do. That's a decision that the council would need to make. But there is one alternative that I'll point out where if you do the improvements, it puts some homes into the floodplain, and in that situation, it would need to be a coordinated effort because you couldn't do these improvements and put people in the floodplain. That would probably be, I'm just gonna take that idea. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So we identified 6 alternatives. There was 2 where we left the railroad bridges alone and built new bridges at different locations. And then each of those has a buyout and a channel grading alternate. 2 where we replaced the railroad culverts and built some new bridges, but not all. And then each of those has a buyout and a channel grading option, and then the regional detention pond, and then the buyout zone. So the first one is reconstruction of Chin Chapel Bridge, Estates Drive Bridge, Meadow Drive Bridge, and the buyout of 3 homes. So that's the 3 that are remaining once the models have been done. So the total cost for all of that is $4.6 million. Alternative 2 is similar. It's the reconstruction of Chin Chapel Bridge, reconstruction of Estates, reconstruction of Meadow, and then channel grading, which eliminates the need to buy out those homes to the north. And then the buyout of this guy down here, this home right here. And so this one, we did not get finished floor elevations. We could not gain access to the property to get the finished floor. So it very well may be out of floodplain, but we included it just to be conservative. And so the cost of this is 4.5. So
So just a question on both sides, that reconstruction of Chin Chapel Bridge. That's the new one we just looked at, right? And you said that was okay as far as the flow.
But once you
free flow.
redo Meadow and the States, it allows more flow down the floodplain.
And that wouldn't,
So then this one, the next two alternatives involve construction of new railroad culverts. So as I said, there's currently two 12 by 10 boxes under the railroad. There would need to be 6 12 by 10 boxes under the railroad. So it'd be Chin Chapel, the States, the railroad, and then buy out the 5 homes. So this is the one where I said some of the construction would widen the floodplain. So, you know, up north here, you see there's more homes to be purchased. And that's because letting all that flow through the railroad widens the floodplain. So that would be one where you would, you know, you couldn't just say this is voluntary. You would need to be, if you could do purchase the homes, then you could do the project. And that's total 8.2. So railroad bridge construction is expensive.
to be inquisitive, sorry for asking a lot of questions. So if you fix the railroad bridges culvert, does it help the people on the south side?
Yes, so what that does is it allows Meadow to flow freely and you wouldn't have to do the Meadow Bridge. So that's why it's not included, because that damming effect would no longer be there and Meadow can flow free.
And how about further up? How about further south towards Double Oak area, towards 407?
It starts
Is that-
losing its impact at some point. We, look at the comparison. So this is the one without the railroad, and this is with.
Not much change.
So there's
Okay.
not much change except for there at the railroad itself.
So, can we talk about the railroad just for a second? So, the railroad is undersized for the study, right? What responsibility does the railroad have to maintain proper sizing and drainage?
Probably that's not something that they would. I've never had the railroad say they would improve drainage.
Well, I understand, but there's no legal responsibility.
I'm not aware of any, but we could have that looked at. We didn't
But
investigate
the railroad commission's
really.
a significant influence, but something like that.
And then the fourth alternative is similar to the previous one, Chin Chapel, the States, railroad. Channel grading, which eliminates the purchase of the homes along the board and then the little guy that got it. So 6.9 is the estimate for that. So the substitution of the channel grading for the buyout reduces the cost fairly significantly. And then the regional detention. So this purpose of this exhibit is to really show you the size of the detention pond that would need to be built. So don't think that that is the location, that's the only location that would work. It was just a location that minimized impacts to homes. And so it's 45 acres. It does remove the 2 homes at the south from the floodplain. And then it allows all of the roadway bridges to pass the 100-year event. This location is the location of a youth camp. So I don't know, if that camp is still active. If it is, I'm sure that's something to be evaluated. But it was just a location that we were showing to show kind of the size. So you could do a series of smaller ponds. You could do a smaller pond that had less impact on the downstream events. We could evaluate some scenarios there. Should a detention option be something we want to pursue? It's an expensive option at $13.8 million. But if the city was looking for open space or park improvements, you could do a multi-purpose facility and have some sports fields or trail or something like that. It could also be a wet pond, but once you put water in it, it reduces how much it can hold, so it gets bigger. So that's probably a challenge. But that's the regional detention option. And then the last option is the buyouts. As you said, we may be real low, but the buyouts is an option. The negative side of the buyouts is that the road overtopping is not good. So you're not solving that issue. So here's a summary of all the alternatives. Just as a reminder, you know, to me, the biggest benefit was the accurate floodplain maps, but you also have some alternatives to choose from. We have a selected one that we're hard recommending. We selected all of the alternatives because they met your design standards and they minimize flooding to homes. If we were to pick one, probably alternative 2 would be what we would recommend. It minimizes the buyouts. The railroad is so expensive. It is tends to be a long process to deal with the railroad. So, you know, you have to probably be several years in the planning process if allowed. The detention pond, I mean, I think that's a town discussion because, you know, you may want something like that. So there's other, and you can, you know, if you like part of it and not another part, we could look at different alternatives or mix them. And then one thing that you could look at doing is maybe, you know, the Estates Drive Bridge is probably it passes the lowest event, is the oldest bridge. You could do, maybe do that one, and then maybe put an emergency access road or something drive at the end of Meadow over to, there's a road to the west. Maybe you could get an easement through there and have a gated easement, and minimize having to rebuild bridges. So there's different things we can look at. That doesn't meet the criteria that it would provide a safety valve for some of those people. So that's kind of the end result of the alternative. So I was just going to pause here and get your thoughts, see if you wanted us to look at something, did you miss something, but what type of feedback do you have on?
Even if you got, I think you said, at the end of the State's Drive, even if you got some type of easement through, you still have to cross the point there through the bridge. Especially if you go over. There is a property there that would allow it, it comes off Fort Hill. Of course, you have to buy it and get all the road a little bit. It's still on those bridges. It's still.
So of these 6 alternatives, some of them solve for the road topping issue and some do not.
All of them except alternative 6.
All of them solve for that except for 6. Okay.
Probably not, maybe you're in the purview of this, or not, I don't know. But the States Drive, of course, we talked about that before being the biggest, lowest bridge we have relative to water and million houses on the end of the cul-de-sac. The mayor's house being one at the time. But did you guys talk about or have any ideas on estimating just fixing that bridge?
We had an individual, I didn't bring them, but we had individual numbers for each bridge. I mean, this is a composite of all of the bridges, but they're around $1 million each.
About $1 million. And is there a process? So not being a road engineer, is there a process? Because it is really only one lane bridge. If you look at it, you know, from the old days, how do you do that and keep those houses active without expanding the width of that area very much? You just build a separate
You
lane.
have to probably build them a little separate or come up with some sort of package road, temporary road or something to give them some access. We just have to look at it closely, but it can be done.
I think you built 2 sides.
Half and half.
Yeah.
And there's enough area to do that. You get 2 cars past it now.
Yeah, well, you can do
But, well, it's not, it can be done now.
And I think so if you said, let's do alternative to, you know, you got really excited about it, I think we would recommend, you didn't have $4.5 million just sitting there ready to spend. We would recommend probably a State Drive Bridge be first.
On the look.
And, or you can get, and then, you know, we can recommend some, the order of activities if you don't want to do something huge, so. Okay, and then, the erosion assessment. So we did not do cost estimates on the erosion assessment, mainly because we wanted to kind of get your feedback, see what you thought about the bridges. You can get as many different erosion solutions as you can engineers. I mean, it is a spectrum of soft solutions to, you know, hard concrete solutions. But what we did was we did some site visits, and then we looked at areas where the velocities were greater than 6 feet per second, because that's generally considered potential erosive velocity. A lot of cities have different policies. I don't know if your town has run across this enough to have policies on when you do erosion projects. Most cities say we're only going to protect our infrastructure. But some cities have some protection of private property through partnerships with adjacent property owners and things like that. But I guess my caution in my experience with erosion is beware of just making a spot repair and fixing it at one location. You know, sending, you know, just somebody out there to put some grouted rock or crap or something in a location where you think it'll be okay. Because what happens a lot of times is upstream and downstream of that, it'll cause it to erode more, and then it'll undermine what you did. So I think it's important to be just very careful with how you approach that, and to, you know, look at a whole, look at a segment at a time and see where you can just make sure you're not causing the problem upstream or downstream. So we looked at 4 locations where the velocities were above 6 feet per second, 2 bridges, Chin Chapel and Estates, and then there were 2 areas where it was getting close to some residential property. So Chin Chapel, this is the picture we looked at earlier. So this is the view to the west. So there's some issues with some erosion under the rock riprap, and then some pictures, some erosion upstream that probably is giving that kind of boomerang effect there. And then Estates. So you can kind of see where it's very close up under here. We didn't get great pictures. These were pictures of surveys too. It's hard to get them in the spring and the summer because everything gets really overgrown. But there might be some issues there. I think it just takes some additional evaluation. If you were going to pre-move your Estates Rock Bridge, you would do that anyway. And then, so there's one home where this is a accessory building here. It's a garage, workshop, something like that. I'm not sure exactly. It's not the main home, but it's within 20 to 30 feet of the corner of this building and close to this fence. This one down here is also an accessory building, and it's probably about 100 feet away, so it's not quite as close. And I guess that would be a question is if the council is aware of any other erosion areas that they'd like for us to take a look at.
Council.
I did some, sorry, I did some kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't talk to Lisa. Oh, she said, who's the person on the other side of Chin Chapel Road that you talked to me about with erosion in their backyard?
Brian and Lisa Thomas.
There you go, their place. So I think they're aware of that.
That'd be on the opposite side.
That'd be on the east side of Chin Chapel.
That's a railroad track.
Yes, well, north of the railroad tracks road, it's where it flows under and then goes out and it's gonna erode their backyard, flooding into their house.
That's just in the core area there, you know.
That's their property though, it's, I understand, it's front of the village.
And we can continue it, you know, we'll find what the report and we can continue looking at. So the discussion points this evening gave some feedback on the conceptual alternatives. If you're generally okay with what we selected, we will file that up in the report. But if you have another alternative you'd like for us to include or look at, we can include that as well.
There's no action on this tonight. What we'll probably do is ask council to get their comments back to the citizens, to get their comments back to town hall. And then Chris and you.
And that was the next thing is what do you, so public input was part of the scope of this project. And what did you see that being a town hall
We could
or?
probably, let's, let me get with the council and we'll have either a public hearing. Would probably be the best thing to do, hold a public hearing at the future meeting, and take it from there. And in the meantime, we'll get input back from the council.
Okay.
But, and then see where the.
Can I ask one more question? Sure. So, Poindexter Creek, when you get in the woods, you get in the trees and things, you mentioned that in the spring and summertime, with all the growth and things, that slows the water effects it up a lot. Would cleaning the creek out, or walking, taking machines down, cleaning the creek out, help anything at all? Would it stop our,
I think it
flooding?
would make your erosion worse.
Erosion worse.
It would start everything to go faster. So the trees and the brush do slow it down a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
Tend to say, leave it alone the best you can. And if a homeowner has a tree or something fall in there, maybe help them remove it if it's a flood hazard. Maybe cut it off. So sometimes the tree will fall and it'll take that root ball, or at least start to look like it's taking the root ball with it. And sometimes the best thing to do there is just to cut it off at the root and let that stay. Because you don't want that pressure, because once that dirt is exposed, it starts. So just like that, and that could be part of that flood mitigation strategy document, is given like some feedback to residents and the town staff of how to handle different situations.
Anything else, council? No.
So
Go ahead.
one more slide.
Okay. Go ahead. I run out of book reading.
And so we talked a little bit earlier about pursuit of a FEMA map revision. So if you want us to do that, did we say put your packet together?
No, I had to turn the page.
So pursuit of a FEMA map revision or modification, that would officially take the people that are removed out of the floodplain. And so the next steps would be public input. We'll finalize the report based on your feedback. We will prepare and incorporate a flood management strategy. And what we're seeing that as is kind of a draft CIP for you of what order you want to do things in. We'll make a recommendation of, which alternative based on the comments and the public feedback. And then incorporate a CIP and maybe some creek care guidelines and anything else that the town might find helpful. And I think maybe through the public input, we can flesh that out a little bit, and give you something that's helpful. And then a FEMA map revision if requested. And so that's the end of the presentation. And so if there are any additional comments, I'll take them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good presentation. Thank you. Next item tonight, council, is consent agenda and a item on the consent agenda may be removed by any member of council for individual discussion or consideration. Council, anything to be removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as written.
I have a motion by the mayor pro tem. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Councilmember Andrews. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion unanimous, motion carries. The next three items I'm going to do in one vote. Discussion consideration of act upon recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission regards the final plat for Vickery Phase 2 containing 9.930 acres with 22 lots and one open space. Item 2 is consider act upon the recommendation of P&Z for commission regarding the final plat of Vickery Phase 3 containing 54 lots and 12.94 acres. Item 3 is discussion consideration upon a recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the final plat Victory Phase 4, containing 50 residential lots and 1 open space on 13.46 acres. Any discussion, council, on those 3 items? Hearing no discussion, I entertain a motion to approve action items 1, 2, and 3. Is there a motion?
I make the motion.
Motion by Councilmember Johnson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by the Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor? Councilmember Mayor.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Castillo.
Aye.
Councilmember Andrews. Aye. The unanimous motion carries all 3. Next item is discussion. Consider taking action regarding appointing Robin Ramsey as a Copper Canyon municipal judge and approving the contract between the town of Copper Canyon and Robin Ramsey and all matters, incidents related here too. I believe you have his resume. We discussed, see about getting him as permanent in the past. If there's no discussion, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint Robert Ramsey as Copper Canyon Municipal Judge.
I have a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Council Member Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Castillo. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous motion carries. Next item is discussion, consider taking action regarding moving $360,340 in revenue and over expenditures from the 2019-2020 fiscal year into the town reserve bank account and all matters incident related here too. Council, this is where we have funds that we're moving over into a holding fund, if you will, that we've been able to do this the last few years. So,
Pretty consistently.
That's funds we haven't spent.
yeah, it's money we have not spent, and when I get in the budget, we'll have a little better news than that. So that I entertain a motion to move those funds.
I'll make a motion that we move $360,340 of revenue over expenditures in the 19 to 20 fiscal years of the town's reserve bank.
We have a motion by the Mayor Pro Tem. I have a second.
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
And motion carries. Next item is discussion consideration of taking action regarding the 2021 and 2022 joint interlocal cooperative agreement with the Law Enforcement Patrol Service between Denton County and the town of Copper Canyon and all matters related here too. Council, this is a renewal of our agreement with the Sheriff's Department. Councilmember Mayor, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, any comments or confidence for another year?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the only thing that I want to add is in the near future, I'm going to be getting together with our sheriffs just to go over what we would like to see as a town going forward in terms of enforcement and just to kind of get a feel for where they're at and how we can help them do their job better. I know with Chin Chapel, which is pretty crazy out here, but just have an opportunity to sit down with them and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of law enforcement and also address any issues that may come up with the
Yeah,
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Because part of this with the Sheriff's Department was we passed in the previous council the 50 hours of night patrols. And I was wondering, have we accomplished any of those hours and all the night patrols off schedule, which we reached agreement correctly around here, Donna, with the Sheriff's Department ability for us to do that.
We have an issue right now with, currently the sheriff's office is understaffed. We have had overtime like on the 4th of July and a couple of nights, but not consistently. And the Sheriff's Department, what they do, they won't give the overtime to just our officers who are familiar with Copper Canyon. They will put other officers in here. But the problem is right now, there's such a shortage, they don't have officers to do the overtime.
Okay, so when I ran that program, tried to get it, and we got it through and discussed with the Sheriff's Department, my understanding is that they agreed to our contract and agreed to our position on that. Because for night patrols, because people are concerned about that.
They did, and they said that either let them to do some overtime, or they would change their hours up, which they have been doing, changing their hours up, their shifts.
And it's still random, right?
Yes.
So random,
Mhm.
but the original program was not designed for shifting their hours, it was just to give them extra hours. So we're not doing that quite yet,
No,
but we'd like to have that worked on because we do need some night patrols. I think, don't we? I mean, that's what people have been wanting.
we would like to be more consistent, but until Denton County gets up to staff, then we have an issue too.
So the people know that we're working on the problem with Denton County Sheriff
Yes,
are really not allowing us to get that done yet for their procedures,
right,
but it's still on the table and available for our department.
We approve the funds.
We approve the funds.
right.
And the next question I have is, before we approve this agreement, we did go to other departments. You and I talked about it, Donna, before, about the cost of contracting with a Double Oak or a Highland Village or even an Argyle, and the cost of that just becomes too exceptional for us.
That's
Is
right.
your opinion and stuff, the dollars are easier at compared to what we have today.
Mhm.
So this program that we have today, our sheriff's department patrolling our dedicated 2 sheriffs to our town is a good economical process for doing their job.
It is, the alternative would be, say, a Highland Village. Oh, I'm sorry. go
No,
ahead.
that's fine. Just to bring you up to date on that, when I took over that position, the first thing I did was I went with Donna and we got in touch with the Highland Village Police Department, their mayor. We sat down with them, had at least one meeting, one good long meeting. We did some preliminary work. I was very interested in trying to look around and try to find a better solution for our law enforcement needs. Not that we're displeased at all with the sheriff, but I was really hoping to be able to get the town a 24/7 coverage that was within our budgetary constraints. Unfortunately, after working particularly with Highland Village, and my focus was there because they're right across the street. They patrol, as we all know, 24/99 all the time. So it wouldn't be difficult for them to, on a emergency call, send somebody out here and be here in 5 minutes, which unfortunately, because the county process takes so much longer, you're looking sometimes at 35, 40-minute response time. And I was really hopeful that we could get Highland Village on board. Unfortunately, it comes down to math and numbers and how many officers they need and what it costs them to provide an officer plus some percentage of benefit to Highland Village. And it was just totally unfeasible. Even to match the coverage that we have today, it would have cost a little bit more. And really, we would not be gaining any added benefit in terms of pure hours of coverage. And the other issue that is something I initially had thought of is how long does it take to do that? They currently don't have the manpower to bring 2 officers on to match the coverage we have. They were at least 6 months to 12 months out to hire new officers who hopefully were pre-trained and could be on board within their department in 2 months. So it just was not feasible to do in the timeframe that we have. We'll continue to look at it, but it just comes down to money. It's just the bottom line. So, good.
Thanks for doing that research. But I would share with you that we've looked at this probably a half a dozen times in the last decade in this town. And we've looked at all kinds of scenarios. Double Oak, Highland Village, getting our own police force, et cetera. And I've done the numbers, on a lot of them, and I'm telling you, it's surprising. I was shocked how different the numbers were, how much higher it was to go engage neighboring towns to get the coverage. We talk about dedicated police officers, cars, and we start adding the numbers up. So I'm not advocating you took a position. I can tell you that the ranches that we have in the county is the most economically feasible one. And it continues to be for some reason that way, which is good, I guess. It's as long as it's meeting our needs, and I think we have some work to do there, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not advocating doing that operation. What I want is, I want on the record, I want the people to know that we did look at those options. I looked at them before, you looked at them really, with the new council here, and And economically, it makes no sense for us to do that in this town. So that's why we're in this option. It's the best option we have for security for our town. And that's important for everybody to understand that, because I get that, that's a question a lot. You know, why do we have sheriffs? Why do we do this contract out? It's too expensive to do it the other way. So we really do have the best option for us in this town we have. That's my point here. I'm not advocating for Amos, but I want everybody to know that the town council has looked at that option across the board in various towns around here, contract with, and it becomes too expensive.
Would you make a motion to approve this contract?
I'll make a motion to approve this contract.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mayor, I have a second by Councilmember Hand, all in favor? Aye, unanimous, motion carries. Next item is discussion, consider taking action regarding drainage issue between 606 and 616 Chapel Pit, City Chapel. Council, you have in your packet, series of bids. Chris, could you come up to the podium and walk us through these?
Okay. So basically, what you have in front of you are three options that I looked at just for, some different choices for moving forward with rearmoring or doing some improvements to that channel. The first option would be regrading to 3-to-1 slopes and redoing the stone riprap. To give you an idea, the existing grade on the south side is anywhere between 1-to-1 and vertical for most of the area on the south side. North side is a little bit flatter. There are some steeper 2-to-1s, but in this case, both the north side and the south side would require some regrading to flatten it down to 3-to-1s. And the reason I looked at 3-to-1 is that's where you really get some advantage on opening the channel, straightening the channel, reducing some velocities, and just getting a lot more area in that channel between the railroad tracks and the road. So that's the first option that I presented. And then there's notes on the bottom through here. One of the things I do want to point out is these costs do not include any tree removal or shrub removal. John has been speaking with the town's, tree trimming company, for that lack of a better word, to break out those costs separately. We thought we did a better price by using a professional who just does that versus trying to roll it into this contract.
Those numbers, you can add to this somewhere between $4,000 to $5,000
No, 4,500 and 5,000.
for tree removal.
Yeah.
That goes on top of these prices.
And then definitely ask me any questions, but I'm going to kind of run through these fairly quick, and then there's an exhibit at the end I want to show everybody. So the second option here is redoing the channel with 2-to-1 slopes, so it's a little bit more grading, opening up a little bit, but really the purpose of that is to give really more of a backing for the new stone, and in this case, the grouted riprap. So we'd be looking at opening the channel a little bit, and to do that, though, we have to take all the existing stone out there, drag it out, and then we come back with essentially a geofabric that would help keep the weeds down and give a much better climbing opportunity between putting the stone back in and the ground. So that's the second option.
Routing is in on this? Where's the routing?
It's the grouted riprap. So the price, if you look at the 18-inch thick grouted riprap.
Oh, routing.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a single item. I didn't break it out. And so the last option that I have here is coming back and doing just 2-to-1 slope on the south side, leaving the north side as is for grading. And as part of that, we would remove all the rock on the embankment and we regrade 2-to-1 slope. We also would add a turf reinforcement mat, which is essentially a strong erosion control and just be something that would eventually vegetate it. And then bringing that up the south side and wrapping it over the embankment to help clean soil back. And then the north side would only get some new stone to kind of fill in the gaps and clean it up a little bit. All these options include adding about, that 10 to 15% of new stone in the channel beds.
So there are some areas, and not quite gap areas, but there are some areas where there's less stone coverage than I'd like to see. So I added about 10% area of loose stone in the center of the channel. And so that is reflected in these costs. And so you see an image on the next page in your packet. And that's looking from the roadway towards the railroad tracks. And the one thing I wanted to point out in here is you can see, especially on the left side, there's a fairly good sized tree that's pretty much hanging over where the channel would be. And then on the south side, you have the same thing, but that tree is much lower in the actual embankment as opposed to kind of sitting on top. Yeah. And so now, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the actual exhibit that's included in your packet. Couple things that I want to point in here, this is typically. Okay, so the dotted line you can see here on the very bottom of the actual drawing is where the 2-to-1 slope would be. So just to put a 2-to-1 slope in, we would have to get either a new temporary drainage, permanent drainage easement, or what's called a temporary use permit. We should be in agreement with the property owner to come through and do the improvements, at which time it would be turned back over to the property owner to maintain it. We wouldn't change our actual drainage easement location. But
Would that area be sloping down where the dotted line is?
yeah, that marks the 2-to-1 slope.
So that starts at 2-1 slope from this property line down into
To the channel bottom.
channel.
Exactly. And you can see the storage building and gravel drive are both shown on here. So based on this drawing, we're 5 to 10 feet away from the storage building and probably closer to 5 feet away from the gravel drive with sloping to a 2-to-1. And that would involve eliminating those trees as well as the shrubs that were mentioned before during the public hearing.
Council, this is my idea, if you would do it, seeing as try to make a choice of 3 different options here tonight. I can't make one. I don't know if y'all can. I'd ask Councilmember Andrews and Councilmember Mayor to get together. We always have other expenses that this is not reflected here. So we need, we're going in kind of blind with all costs. Get with, if you want to get more input from the homeowners, maybe set a meeting here and then bring us back your recommendation. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes, sir.
And then we table this until the first meeting of September. That'll give you 30 days to do that.
The only thing I would like, if you could come up with an estimate on the routing options for how much.
Type routing options.
So how much routing would cost?
Okay,
So
so
you can do that whenever.
Yeah, he can do that whenever, that's the only thing, but I haven't had this meeting.
Chris would be involved
I think they
in.
have.
okay. Yeah, and that might have been a little bit of my misunderstanding. From the last meeting, we discussed that I got to do the property owner on the north one is to avoid any impacts of trees, trying to avoid changing the embankment too much. So that's part of the reason on this third option, we just concentrated on armoring and cleaning up the south side.
I think instead of trying to make that decision, go ahead, sir.
Chris, on this, exhibit here, where we're looking at the bushes there
Yes,
and the slope, would that be roughly a flat bottom, or is it gonna be, because as I count the lines, there's about 10 foot deep there, is that about correct?
that's correct.
That's what I counted, 10 foot deep. That's gonna be pretty steep, 1 to 1, you 5 foot out, 5 foot, you know. 10
Yeah.
down.
And that's why on the south side where that, you can see all the shrubs, the trees, everything where the embankment is now, basically comes back another 5 to 10 feet to get from in some cases close to vertical, so a 2-to-1 minimum.
And how tall are you proposing, excuse me, Fred, how tall are you proposing to put the riprap up that wall? All the way, part of the way?
Just 2.5.
That's what you explained, where the folks can understand
Okay,
also.
So what we looked at is armoring what's considered a normal flow line. So basically what you see out there now goes up 1.5 to 2 feet. We would just be adding another 1.5 to 2 feet to that. We would not be taking it all the way up and wrapping it around the bank or anything like that, based on the spots.
Would you suggest a ground cover of some sort from the stone up to the
Yeah.
crest?
Absolutely.
Cut the erosion down as normal water erodes?
Yes, and that's that turf mat that we included in the cost.
Yes.
So that'll help armor it and it'll provide a really good protection for what's considered really a short-term high velocity. So the storm comes up, but then it clears out relatively quickly. It's not going to be soaked, it's not going to be inundated with water for long term.
I mean, that's one little bit further explanation is because that's one people on the Zoom can understand that we're not talking about taking this whole channel from top to bottom with rock and all that kind of thing. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I want to make one note. I met out there the other day with Tree Shepherds, the arborist, and we did meet with Jim Burns, and he gave us some good history information. But we did talk about the specific trees to take out and shrubs.
Yeah, that all needs to be documented, that what we're gonna do, like Mr. Burns said, we need to have a clear understanding of what we're gonna do, what legally if there's any, with the dedicated right of way that we need to do. And then come up with a price that we all agree on, and then the three of you could, bring forward. With that, I'd if I could get a motion to table this first meeting in September. I would accept that.
I make a motion to table item 7 until September.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, all in favor of the table.
Aye.
Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you, appreciate you. Next item is discussion consideration regarding an ordinance 21-016, changing the time for the regular scheduled P and Z meeting from 7 to 6 p.m. and all matters, incidents, and related thereto. Council, any questions on this? All right,
Rationale.
okay,
Rationale. Wow.
well,
Oh, because the fourth meeting of the month sometimes is council. So if P and Z is meeting that same night, then they're both meeting at 7 o'clock. And we've always had P and Z at 6. It's just in all the different changes we've had over the last several months. Whenever it comes to the ordinances relating to P and Z, the time was changed to 7 p.m. So that's why. And I've talked to the P and Z and they're all good with it.
Can people make the P and Z meetings?
yeah, they were all.
Not the P and Z people, I'm talking about the people sitting in the audience.
Well,
Wording.
I did not survey the
Well, I know,
residents.
but I mean, isn't that the purpose of having meetings at 7 o'clock, so people can get off work and make the meeting and pay attention to it?
We will also be streaming the P and Z meetings, so there's always that option.
Any other discussion, council? Not entertain a motion to,
I make the motion.
the motion to approve.
Yes.
I have a motion by Councilmember Johnson, do I have a second?
No, second.
I have a second by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Mayor,
No.
Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember.
Yes.
Aye. Councilmember Andrews, aye. You know, 4 to approve, Councilmember Mayor against. Next item, council, is my presentation of the preliminary budget of the 2021-2022. Well, boring you with all of the stuff you've already read, this, go over this with the citizens. This year already, we have collected in permitted homes, just in permit fees, the town has brought in $345,488, and there's 2 months to go in the fiscal year. That's just permit fees. We expect the trend to continue, obviously, with the balance of toll, with what's going on Copper Canyon Road. I can tell you there's other subdivisions out there that people are selling their property The Garrison property actually is now on the market, and there are people looking at it. So this is the trend is gonna continue for some time. So this, I have to say that there was a council that made a difficult decision that maybe wasn't popular, but the town is today gonna benefit from it financially. We will be using also this year's budget, we will be using $100,000 out of the crime control tax, a tax that we put up, is it a quarter cent or half cent? So sales tax goes to that, half cent, yeah, goes into that, and so that money really has no place to go other than to offset the cost for patrol. So we're pulling $100,000 out of that money to put into the budget for police patrol for Denton County. We also are increasing our town revenue fund to $500,000. Donna, can you explain that a little bit? Is that just the money we're?
That's actually what you would term your town savings account.
Yeah.
There's a rule of thumb is 3 months operating. We have over 200,000 in there now, but when the town grows and somewhere down the road, having to replace concrete roads, we're bringing it up to $500,000.
We're also bringing on a approval council. We'll be bringing on a contract type code enforcement officer. As we all, we talk about more ordinances and ordinances that we need to have to protect the citizens and to protect our properties, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have no enforcement of that. So this person is contract style code enforcement. They're licensed. They can be used in the courts. They can write citations. We're going to use them so many hours a week. So that will be a new council approval that we'll be bringing on this year as well. It's not a very expensive investment. I think it's $700 a month. $700 a month, I believe it is. We're also, over the past several years, Copper Canyon, we've been very patient with our road system. We were able to last couple of years, 3 years, bring a lot of road projects forward that were stretched way out, and we consolidated them. We took out tax notes. We were able to fund those tax notes. So this year, we're doing, I think, some crack sealing, and we're doing a few slurry coat. And I believe Rolling Acres is one of those that we will be doing some work on. It's simple, fast, there's not a lot of disruption, if any, but it's just to help make things integrity of the roads. This is a very conservative budget. The Mayor Pro Tem has looked at it. We've talked. I've asked Donna to bring back a budget this year that will propose a 2-cent tax reduction. So we're going to lower your taxes. I will tell you, in this council, I would look further down the road. I see this able to do this again, perhaps in a couple of years once you build your fund. Even this budget next year, we're going to be sitting here approving a carryover of 400,000 that will carry over like we did today. So to put it in math that people can understand, a penny on our tax rate, every penny on our tax rate, on our evaluation in the town, generates some $30,000. So 2 cents on the tax rate is a $60,000 tax fund reduction into our general fund. It's not going to make or break the town. It's not going to it's a simple couple of $100 on some month's tax bill. But it's the point that we're in a financial place, and we're going to be in a good financial place for a long time, that we should be able to start reducing our taxes and see some benefit from what what's putting pressure on us, which is development. So, Mayor Pro Tem, you want to comment?
I think it's, we have been conservative about the planning, but at the end of the day, we're not going to take any more money than we believe we need. And so I think the right thing to do is bring it back to the citizens that are paying taxes. So that's what we decided to do. The drainage stuff we talked about earlier is obviously a factor, but I think we have a lot of clear runway for
We're very conservative about it. We've maintained that for a long time.
So, good. So that's my report. There's really no action to take. The next item, though, is discussion, consideration, and taking action regarding filing the 2021-2022 budget with town secretaries and all matters related thereto. Also, I want to make one more statement. By the fact that we're lowering our tax rate, we do not have to have 2 meetings in September because we're not increasing our tax rate, keeping it the same. So we're able to have the meeting, the second meeting in August, will approve the budget, and that will take care of us for the year. We'll still have to meet 1 meeting in September. If there was a reason to have a second, we would. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to file this with the town secretary.
I'll make a motion, file in 2021, 2022 town budget.
Motion by the mayor pro tem, do I have a second?
Can I ask a question because I'm new? So if we pass this in, we take those numbers, is that thing, how do we discuss the numbers in here to discuss that next time, this after the second meeting?
Yes. So if you have numbers you want to bring forward, and if for some reason the town doesn't, you want to increase the tax rate, or you don't want to lower the tax rate, or you want
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
spend some more money somewhere, that's when we need to do it. So you can do that by an amendment of the budget at that time.
Can I also reduce money somewhere if I suggest that?
If you obviously introduce it, you just take 3 other gentlemen on
Thank
the board to.
I'll work on that issue, thank you.
And the second meeting in August is a public hearing
Yes,
on the budget.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So I have a motion by the mayor pro tem, I have a second.
I'll second.
I have a second by the deputy mayor pro tem, all in favor of filing the budget? Aye, unanimous, motion carried. Next item is a discussion item. Discussion, property aligning the town zoning map with our current zoning ordinance related to the established proper placement of a known area of the Estates of Copper Canyon transition area. Backup information, section 2-103, standards of the town center. Council, under the suggestion of the town attorney, due to the fact that there is a applicant on file, there have been 2 DRC meetings, there has been a planning and zoning meeting that has been approved to move forward in the process, that you do not discuss realigning anything to do with property that's under current consideration of the town. If there's any presentation to be made, it is highly recommended by the town attorney that we do it in an executive session. If you would like to go into an executive session tonight, I can make arrangements for that, and we will dismiss this to the audience and adjourn and then reopen back into an executive session. If not, if you would like to have an executive session at the next council meeting, I'll be happy to make arrangements for that to take place as well. Councilmember Mayor, I know this is your subject. I don't mean to if you want to make a presentation, I obviously can't stop you. It's just under the recommendation of the city attorney that we be very careful on what we do, doing the factors and applicant in place.
And his recommendation is based on if a change in zoning is approved or discussed.
Discussing any changes in zoning.
Yeah.
While there's a pending application for
So,
the district.
My presentation does not change the zoning at all.
Just council discussing possibly changing zoning or modifying the zoning while there's a pending application
Yeah.
in that zoning district. I would advise again. Yes.
So as my presentation does not discuss changing zoning at all, but it discusses other things, but that's. Again, on your recommendation, the town recommendation, I will present my presentation.
I would, my suggestion would, if you would make that presentation, and get that presentation to the town attorney and allow them, if he feels that it's not harmful at the next meeting.
Okay, I can do that.
Then we would allow it. At this point, we don't know what it is.
Yep.
And we don't know whether it would cause legal harm to the town. If the applicant or the property owners of said property that is involved could cause us a legal.
I will forward it to the town attorney.
I would appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your cooperation.
Do we need a motion to table?
There is no discussion here. There's no action item. With that being said, is there any items to be put on the next council agenda? Hearing none, time being 8:40, I would ask for the council to make a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by the mayor pro tem, do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Rogers, all in favor? Aye, unanimous, motion carries.
Yeah.